Welcome to the Academic Language Webinar Series brought to you in collaboration with the Nebraska Department of Education, NEMTSS, and Region 11 Comprehensive Center. My name is Ann Hubble, and I am a Title III EL Specialist at NDE.
And my name is Brooke Gabers. I'm the Region 3 Support Lead for Nebraska MTSS.
And my name is Jeanette King, and I am the Nebraska Liaison for the Region 11 Comprehensive Center at McCrell International.
This four-part series will cover 4 practical concepts that can be employed immediately at Tier 1 core to support the use of academic language. These concepts are essential for the success of multilingual learners, but they are good for all students. In this webinar, we will be addressing comprehensible input as part 3 of the series.
This is a poster we have available as a PDF link below the video. As you can see, we've identified a few key bullets that represent comprehensible input that we'll address later in this webinar. Let's start by defining academic language. According to Ton Findley, a professor of education at East Carolina University and former teacher, academic language is the verbal clothing that we use in formal settings that supports students in becoming college, career, and community ready. There are 2 highlighted areas to consider: the language of instruction that is used across content areas, and the language of a specific discipline or content area. We also wanted to clarify language that you might hear used throughout the webinar. The Nebraska Department of Education honors students' language abilities as an asset and values the many languages multilingual learners, or MLs, bring to enrich classrooms in Nebraska. Using the term ML emphasizes the importance of respecting home language as students are simultaneously learning English in Nebraska schools. In addition to the term ML, English learner, or EL, is the term used in federal and state policy, which is why you may hear the 2 used interchangeably. Throughout this webinar, we will define comprehensible input as a practical concept to enhance Tier 1 core and support the use of academic language. Reflect on the importance of comprehensible input for all students, especially multilingual learners. Identify current practices to enhance comprehensible input, and we will share comprehensible input strategies that you can employ at Tier 1 core immediately.
You may be asking yourself, what does comprehensible input mean? Here is a great quote from Dr. Stephen Krashen, an expert in second language acquisition. "We acquire language when we understand the messages we receive, when we understand what people tell us, and when we understand what we read." When we think about comprehensible input, we can make connections to comprehension. When students understand what they hear and what they read, they learn. Here is a list of some non-examples of comprehensible input. When a multilingual learner nods and smiles, that doesn't always mean they understand. Teachers may not realize a student isn't understanding because the student is nodding and smiling. These non-examples are things we don't want to do because they don't contribute to understanding a message. Using a single modality, for example, just looking at a text or just lecturing, does not build understanding. Speaking without any inflection or too quickly is very difficult for language learners to follow and process. Providing no images or connections to the lesson leaves the student with just words in a language he or she doesn't understand. On the other hand, having too many visuals that don't really connect to the lesson can be very distracting and confusing. Using culturally unfamiliar images or not relating to the student's background and experiences also misses the opportunity to make connections and build understanding. On the other hand, there are lots of things teachers can do to increase comprehensible input for their students. Teachers can use multiple modes of input, such as speaking the directions and then having them also posted so students can read as they listen. The simple act of providing images and real props will increase the level of understanding, even if students don't know the English words yet. Video clips can help students with background knowledge and making connections, and graphic organizers help with the organizing of information. It is also valuable to recognize the experiences that students bring with them and use those to make connections with your lesson. Giving students time to process and interact with peers is also very helpful in raising the level of comprehensible input and helping students understand the messages they are receiving. All of these examples use an asset-based approach and build on what students already know and what they are capable of learning. Imagine yourself moving to a new country, a new culture, and a new language. Now imagine yourself in a classroom trying to learn both the content and the language. What if the student stood at the front of the room and just talked the entire time? What do you think you would learn? Now imagine the same situation but with a different classroom experience. What if the teacher used props, visuals, and gestures? What if the teacher emphasized the key vocabulary and pointed to a visual or held up an object to help you learn the new terms? What if the teacher had key vocabulary with pictures posted around the classroom? What if the teacher used cognates, those words that mean the same and sound the same in both languages? What if the teacher used higher order thinking skills such as comparing and contrasting, or creating, or evaluating? As you think about the second scenario, what do you think would happen to your learning about the content and the language? If you think it would improve, you are correct. When we understand the messages we receive, we will acquire the new language. This is comprehensible input.
So the next question you may have is, why does comprehensible input matter? We know that research supports the connections between comprehensible input and language acquisition. We wanted to provide you a few resources for your reference. Remember, students only acquire language when they understand what they hear and read. We also know that there's a relationship between comprehensible input and content learning. This includes using students' cultural knowledge and other communicative resources, including multiple pathways, to help learners build background knowledge and make meaning.
Now that we know a little bit more about what comprehensible input is and the research that tells us it's important, let's address a few ways that you can increase comprehensible input in your classroom. In safe environments, your brain can focus more on acquiring the language. Stephen Krashen calls this the affective filter. We all have a language acquisition device in our brains, and a safe space allows us to access and learn the language. Building relationships is one of those ways in which you can create a safe learning environment for students. Relationships also enable you to know who students are and where they come from to make connections. There are also a myriad of other benefits to building positive relationships, like higher academic achievement, increased attendance, stronger levels of self-motivation and self-regulation, and improved goal-setting skills. At the most fundamental level, we are social creatures designed for human connection. Universally designing your instruction is another way to increase comprehensible input. Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. When we talk about comprehensible input, we're referring to the second principle of the framework, representation, or thinking about how the information is presented to learners. Learners differ in the ways that they perceive and comprehend information that is presented to them. All students approach content differently. For example, some students may grasp information quicker or more efficiently through visual or auditory means rather than printed text. Also, learning and transfer of learning occurs when multiple representations are used, because they allow students to make connections within as well as between concepts. In short, there's not one means of representation that will be optimal for all learners, so providing options for representation is essential. We'll address some examples of what it looks like to provide multiple means of representation in the next objective.
So let's explore some strategies for increasing comprehensible input. The Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, or SIOP, speaks to building and activating background knowledge. and includes these 3 key points. How can teachers know what students may have in their background? One idea is to do a survey prior to a lesson. Another way is to create a KWL chart or an anticipation guide. Be aware of the various cultures represented in your classroom or school. It can be very helpful for comprehensible input to make cultural connections. However, remember, one student from a different country cannot give information for the entire country. They can give their personal experiences from that country, just as we cannot speak for all of the United States. We can give our experiences from where we live, who we interact with, and how we interact with others. So when activating background knowledge, honor cultures and experiences that the students bring to the classroom. Here's a list of strategies to help with comprehensible input. So let's dig into a few of these. For realia, teachers use actual objects from everyday life in a lesson. For example, when teaching a lesson on measurement, the teacher may bring in measuring cups, tape measures, and scales to help students make connections. If the student's first language has cognates or similar sounding words to English, the teacher can use these to help the student make meaning. For example, area in English and el área in Spanish sound similar enough for students to understand. There are many lists of cognates available that can be useful, including Coloring Colorado, linked in our resources here.
A little bit ago, we introduced the UDL framework and emphasized the importance of providing multiple means of representation to increase comprehensible input. Here are a few ideas of what it might look like to put that into practice. It might be using dual language print, enabling closed caption on your videos, using visual aids, supporting students in creating their own materials to represent your course content, like creating concept maps or storyboards, or using frequent checks for understanding. Using gestures is a memory supporting strategy that can also help convey meaning of vocabulary. It's important to connect the gestures to the vocabulary so that they demonstrate the meaning of the word they represent. Teachers can consider acting out or role-playing to demonstrate the meaning, but remember, it's more than just pointing. We have a few examples of what this might look like. In a math class, I could use my arms to demonstrate what an obtuse angle looks like. In science, we might be talking about chemical reactions and particles colliding, and I could demonstrate a collision with my hands. I could also demonstrate evaporation as part of the water cycle by wiggling my fingers and moving my hands upward to demonstrate water changing from a liquid to a gas and moving from Earth's surface to the atmosphere.
TPR is a language teaching method built around the coordination of speech and action. It teaches language through movement. It was developed by James Asher, a professor of psychology at San Jose State University in California. Asher looked at adult second language acquisition as a parallel process to a child learning his or her first language. Children learn their first language as they are given commands, and they respond to these commands physically before they are able to produce verbal responses. Young children wave goodbye, pick up a toy, eat a snack, and hug mommy or daddy before they are ever able to produce those words or sentences. The purpose of TPR, or total physical response, is to create a link, a brain link between the speech and the action to boost the language and vocabulary learning. It is working on comprehensible input and understanding the messages given. Total physical response, TPR, may be used to teach many types of vocabulary, but works best when teaching vocabulary connected with action. It is an effective strategy to use with English language learners as well as native speakers when learning new language. Dr. Stephen Krashen has said there is one key to acquiring a second language. That important key is comprehensible input. When we understand the messages we receive, we will acquire that new language. As teachers work with students at the various stages of language acquisition, they need different supports to help with comprehensible input. ELPA 21 offers some tools to support differentiation. The differentiation poster breaks down the domains of listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Across the top level from emerging to proficient, each domain has a brief description of what the student can do at this stage in this domain. Then there are instructional strategies and assessment options for each language level in each domain. Another tool is the differentiation flipbook. This tool offers 8 different strategies or graphic organizers, such as a Venn diagram, T-chart, concept map, and others. It provides a model of differentiation for the emerging, low progressing, and high progressing stages of language acquisition. There are templates for each of these graphic organizers so that teachers can use them with their lesson. When teachers provide the appropriate scaffolds and supports for students at the various stages of language acquisition, students are able to better understand the content and the language. The teachers are providing students with comprehensible input. To review, throughout this webinar, we have defined comprehensible input as a practical concept to enhance Tier 1 core and support the use of academic language. We reflected on the importance of comprehensible input for all students, especially multilingual learners. We identified current practices to enhance comprehensible input, and we shared comprehensible input strategies that you can employ at Tier 1 core immediately. Please feel free to contact any of us at NDE, NEMTSS, or the Region 11 Comprehensive Center with questions you may have using the URLs or links on the screen. Thank you, and we hope you have a wonderful day.